I never thought silence could be so loud. But there I was, sitting in Dr. Patricia Montgomery's office, watching her hands tremble as she stared at my medical file. Not at the ultrasound monitor where my baby's tiny heart was beating away. No, she was staring at the paperwork, at my husband's name printed right there at the top, Marcus Lennox. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She reached over and switched off the monitor. Just like that. Mid-examination, like someone had just unplugged my entire existence. "Mrs. Lennox," she whispered, and I had to lean forward to even hear her. "I need to speak with you, right now, privately." She practically pulled me into her office, shut the door, and I heard the lock click behind us. My first thought, something's wrong with my baby. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst right out of my chest. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My hands went to my stomach instinctively, like I could protect this little life inside me from whatever terrible news was coming. And then she said it, words that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. "You need to leave your husband, today, before you go home. Get a divorce lawyer first." I actually laughed, like full-on laughed out loud. It was the kind of laugh that comes when something is so absurd your brain can't process it any other way. "What? Why? We're having a baby together. We're happy. I don't understand." Her face was white as chalk. "That's exactly the problem. What I'm about to show you will destroy everything you think you know about your marriage. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. But let me back up, because you need to understand how I ended up in that office, 5 months pregnant, learning that my entire life had been an elaborately constructed lie told by the man who whispered sweet nothings in my ear every single night. My name is Sienna Hartley. I'm 34 years old. I work as a creative director at a design agency in Massachusetts, and I come from what people politely call generational wealth. My great-aunt Adelaide passed away 6 years ago and left me her entire estate. We're talking about $3.7 million in a trust, plus the historic Hartley Manor that's been in our family since 1892. 7 generations of women had lived, loved, and built their lives in that house. I never advertised it. I worked hard at my career. I drove a 12-year-old Honda and got my morning coffee from the same corner shop every day. The inheritance was safety, not status, but apparently it made me a walking target. I just didn't know it yet. I met Marcus Lennox 4.5 years ago at my family's annual autumn fundraiser. The Hartleys had been hosting it for over a century. That particular evening, I was standing near the champagne fountain, trying to escape a conversation with a man who'd asked about my net worth within 2 minutes of introducing himself. Classy, right? Then Marcus appeared. 6'1", sandy brown hair, this easy, confident smile. He asked what I was drinking, made some joke about the terrible jazz trio my cousin had hired, and didn't mention money once. He told me he was just a wealth management consultant who'd gotten the last-minute invitation from a colleague. Said he had no idea who the Hartley family even was. Okay, looking back now, that should have been my first giant waving red flag. A wealth management consultant who doesn't research the host family of a major charity event? That's like a surgeon showing up to an operation saying, "Oh, we're cutting someone open today? Had no idea." Strong, but I was so tired of obvious fortune hunters. And here was this charming man asking about my favorite authors instead of my bank statements. We dated for 14 months. Marcus was attentive, thoughtful, remembered tiny details about conversations we'd had weeks earlier. He insisted on paying for dinners even though I could have bought the entire restaurant without checking my account balance. He seemed so genuine and strong. My mother, Helena, saw through him immediately. After their first meeting, she pulled me into the library. "That man's smile is a performance," she said, her voice tight with worry. "Something is fundamentally wrong with him, Sienna. I can feel it in my bones." I told her she was being paranoid, overprotective. I might have even said jealous, which I regret to this day. We fought about Marcus constantly. Eventually, we just stopped speaking. Almost 3 years of cold silence between me and the woman who'd raised me. Birthday texts and nothing more. All because I chose to believe my husband over my own mother. Spoiler alert, Mom was right about everything, and she's been waiting very patiently to remind me of that fact. At this point, she's earned it 10 times over. Marcus and I got married after 14 months of dating. Gorgeous ceremony at my great-aunt's estate. He actually cried during his vows, real tears streaming down his face as he promised to love and cherish me forever. Looking back, those were probably the most genuine tears he ever shed. Not from joy, from relief. His long game was finally working. Armstrong, after 2.5 years of trying for a baby naturally, we saw a fertility specialist. The diagnosis felt like a truck hitting us at full speed. Marcus had severe male factor infertility. His sperm count was nearly non-existent, and what little was there barely functioned. Natural conception was essentially impossible. Marcus seemed absolutely devastated. He cried in the parking lot for 30 minutes. He apologized over and over like it was some personal failing. I held him, told him we'd figure it out together. That's what marriage meant, right? After 2.5 years of trying for a baby naturally, we saw a fertility specialist. The diagnosis felt like a truck hitting us at full speed. Marcus seemed absolutely devastated. He cried in the parking lot for 30 minutes. He apologized over and over, like it was some personal failing. What I didn't know was that Marcus wasn't crying from grief. He was crying because his plan had just gotten infinitely more complicated. All that emotion was him recalculating his strategy, not mourning our situation. We decided on IVF with a specialized procedure called ICSI, where doctors inject a single sperm directly into an egg. Our best chance, they said. Marcus insisted on researching clinics himself. He found one he claimed was absolutely perfect. He handled all the paperwork, all the arrangements. At the time, I thought he was being supportive because I was so emotionally exhausted. I thought he was taking care of us. The first cycle failed. It was devastating. I couldn't get out of bed for 4 days straight. Marcus held me, whispered encouragement, promised we'd try again. The second cycle, 8 months ago, worked. 2 pink lines on that pregnancy test that changed everything. I cried happy tears for hours. Marcus held me close, already talking about nursery colors and baby names and the beautiful future we build together. Then, casually, so casually, he mentioned something. "Now that we're becoming a family," he said, "you should probably update your will, just to make sure everything's protected." I thought it was sweet, practical, the kind of thing a responsible husband thinks about. I had absolutely no idea he was already spending my great-aunt's money in his head, already planning exactly how he'd take everything from me. Everything seemed perfect. The loving husband, the baby on the way, the life I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl playing house in my great-aunt's rose garden. I had no idea that in just a few months, a stranger with shaking hands would show me documents that would burn my perfect life to ashes. And I had no idea that the person who'd lit the match was sleeping beside me every single night. Before I continue, I want you to understand something. This isn't just my story. This is a story about how easy it is to miss the signs when someone's pretending to love you. How we explain away the red flags because admitting the truth is too painful. How predators count on our desire to believe in the goodness of people. So if you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if tiny alarm bells are going off in your head about your own relationship, please listen to them. Please trust your instincts. I didn't, and it almost destroyed me. Now, back to how everything unraveled. 5 months pregnant, and something had shifted in my marriage. Small things at first, the kind of things you notice but explain away because the alternative is too terrifying to consider. Marcus started keeping his phone face down everywhere. New passcode I didn't know. He'd step outside to take calls, come back saying it was client stuff, then change the subject before I could ask questions. He claimed he was restructuring investment portfolios during these late-night calls. At 11:30 on a Saturday night. Now, I'm no finance expert, but I'm pretty sure the stock market takes weekends off. Unless Marcus had secret clients in Singapore, which he definitely did not, something else was happening. Something he didn't want me to know about. The late nights at the office multiplied. 4 times a week, sometimes 5. He wouldn't come home until well past midnight. He's a wealth management consultant, not a trauma surgeon. What could possibly require that schedule? I found receipts tucked in his jacket pockets. A restaurant downtown I'd never heard of. $360 for dinner for 2. A boutique hotel in the city, less than an hour from our house? Why would my husband need a hotel room so close to home? End of story. When I asked, Marcus had answers for everything. Smooth, practiced answers that came just a fraction too quickly. Client dinner. Important networking opportunity. The hotel was for a financial conference that ran late, and it just made more sense to stay over than drive home exhausted. And when I pushed harder, when I asked more detailed questions, his entire tone changed. End of story. When I asked more detailed questions, his entire tone changed. It's the pregnancy hormones. My mother warned me about this. Women get irrational when they're pregnant. Don't turn into one of those wives. I felt ashamed for even questioning him. That's how skilled he was at manipulation. He made me apologize for having legitimate concerns. He made me feel like I was the problem. The financial pressure intensified around the same time. Marcus's requests about money became more frequent, more urgent, more creative. We should add me to your trust. What if something happens during delivery? I need to be able to access funds for the baby. It's just logical. Power of attorney is standard for married couples. Everyone does it. Unless you don't trust me, which would really hurt Sienna. Your great-aunt's house is too big for the 3 of us anyway. We should sell it. Invest the money properly. I know exactly which portfolios would maximize our returns. The man wanted me to sell my great-aunt's historic manor and let him invest the proceeds. This is the same man who forgot our anniversary twice and couldn't remember which streaming service had his favorite shows. That's who I should trust with $3.7 million? Absolutely not. Not happening. When I said no, gently and carefully, Marcus's warmth evaporated. He became cold, distant. He started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, claiming I tossed and turned too much now that I was pregnant. The arguments became more frequent. He'd bring up the trust, I'd refuse, and he'd give me the silent treatment for days. His silent treatments lasted exactly until he got hungry or needed something. Funny how principles have time limits tied directly to convenience. He barely touched me anymore. He blamed my changing body, said he didn't want to hurt the baby. It sounded caring on the surface. It felt like rejection in my bones. I tried to talk to him about it. He said I was being needy, hormonal, impossible to please. I started wondering if maybe the problem really was me. One night, I woke up at 2:45 in the morning. Marcus wasn't in bed. I found him in the study, hunched over his phone, speaking in hushed tones. I stood in the hallway outside, my heart pounding, and I listened. "It's almost done," he was saying. "By early summer, everything will be finalized. Just need to wait until." He saw me standing there and hung up immediately. "Work emergency," he said, his face completely neutral. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart." I didn't ask who has work emergencies at 2:45 in the morning, about things being finalized by summer. I was too tired, too pregnant, too desperate to believe my marriage wasn't collapsing. So I went back to bed and pretended I believed him. Pretended everything was fine. But something was eating at me, gnawing away at my peace. My best friend Jade came over for brunch the following weekend. She sat across from me at the kitchen island and watched me make excuse after excuse for Marcus. His stress at work, his adjustment to becoming a father, his worry about finances. Finally, she put down her mimosa and looked at me with those eyes that had known me since college. "Sienna, listen to yourself. When's the last time you talked to your mother?" I didn't answer. "When's the last time Marcus seemed genuinely happy to see you? Not performing happiness for appearances, really truly happy that you walked through the door?" I couldn't answer that either. "Trust your gut," Jade said quietly. "Something is very wrong here." I told her she was overreacting, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Marcus's phone, always face down, his late nights, his sudden obsession with accessing my money, the way he sometimes looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, like I was an equation to solve rather than a person to love. 5 months pregnant. Routine prenatal appointment for an ultrasound. My regular doctor was on vacation, so I was scheduled with a colleague instead, Dr. Patricia Montgomery. I went alone because Marcus had a client meeting he absolutely couldn't reschedule. Standard appointment, nothing unusual expected. I lay back on the exam table, cold gel on my belly, waiting to see my baby dancing on that screen, like always. Dr. Montgomery was pleasant and professional at first. She made small talk while setting up the equipment, asked how I was feeling, if the baby was active, all the normal questions. Then she opened my medical file. She glanced at the paperwork. Her eyes found my husband's name. Her entire face changed. She looked at Marcus's name. Looked at me, back at the name. I watched her hands start to shake. She set down the ultrasound wand. She reached over and turned off the monitor completely. "Mrs. Lennox," she said, and her voice was barely a whisper, "I need to speak with you privately, right now." She walked me to her office, closed the door behind us, and locked it. That's when every worst-case scenario flooded my mind. Something's wrong with the baby. There's a genetic issue. There's a developmental problem. My hands went to my stomach protectively. Then she said words that cracked my world wide open. "I know what your husband did, and I have proof." She pulled a folder from her desk drawer. Her hands were still trembling as she opened it. "My younger sister works at your fertility clinic," she said carefully. 4 weeks ago, she came to me in the middle of the night. She was sobbing. She told me everything. "When I saw your husband's name on your file today, I recognized it immediately." Dr. Montgomery took a deep breath. "Mrs. Lennox, I'm so sorry, but you need to see this before you go home, before he knows that you know." She opened the folder on her desk between us, and everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my pregnancy, my entire life turned to ash right in front of my eyes. Patricia Montgomery's younger sister, Emma, worked as a nurse at the fertility clinic, the same clinic Marcus had so carefully researched for our IVF treatment, the one he'd insisted was absolutely perfect for us. Now I understood why he'd been so particular about that specific choice. Patricia explained everything, her voice steady even though her hands weren't. 4 weeks earlier, Emma had shown up at Patricia's apartment close to 1 in the morning. She was sobbing so hard she couldn't speak coherently. She hadn't been sleeping. She'd lost almost 15 pounds. The guilt had been consuming her for months, and she finally couldn't carry it anymore. 8 months ago, Emma told her, a patient's husband had approached her at the clinic. He was well-dressed, articulate, seemed desperate but reasonable. He explained he had a delicate situation that required discretion. His wife didn't know, he said. But he was using donor sperm for their IVF cycle. Some family genetic condition he didn't want to burden her with. Nothing sinister, just private. He needed help keeping it quiet. He'd compensate her generously for her assistance. $35,000. For a nurse making $54,000 a year, drowning in student loans and medical debt from her father's cancer treatment. It felt impossible to refuse. For now, Emma helped switch the samples. Marcus's sperm, which couldn't have created a pregnancy anyway, was replaced with sperm from a paid donor. The embryologist was involved too. Marcus had approached him separately with another substantial payment. Between the two of them, the switch went completely undetected. The embryologist assured Emma not to worry. The husband knows what he's doing. It's not our business what arrangements married couples make. But it destroyed Emma, especially when she saw in the clinic records that the pregnancy was successful. Somewhere out there was a woman carrying a baby she believed was her husband's biological child. And it wasn't. The guilt ate at Emma every single day. She couldn't look at herself in the mirror. She called in sick constantly. She started having severe anxiety attacks at work. 4 weeks ago, she finally broke. She told Patricia everything. I sat in that office listening to Dr. Montgomery explain how my husband had spent $55,000 to frame me for infidelity. $55,000. That's more than he spent on our entire wedding, including the honeymoon to the Maldives. I guess I finally knew where his real priorities had always been. And there was more. So much more. Patricia laid out the complete scheme Marcus had been building piece by careful piece for over a year. Phase 1 was already complete. Bribe the clinic staff, switch the sperm samples, ensure everyone stays quiet. Phase 2 was also complete. Wait for a successful pregnancy. Play the devoted, excited father-to-be. Build the perfect image of a loving husband. Phase 3 was planned for after the baby was born. Marcus was going to have the embryologist alter the clinic records retroactively. The paperwork would be changed to show that our second IVF cycle had failed. That way, it would appear we had conceived naturally afterward. Phase 4 was the trap. After the birth, Marcus planned to suggest a DNA test. He'd frame it as something sentimental and meaningful. Proof of fatherhood to display in the nursery, a celebration of our family bond. And Phase 5 was the kill shot. When the DNA test proved he wasn't the biological father, and when the medical records showed we'd conceived naturally after IVF failed, he would have all the evidence he needed. His wife had cheated on him. The baby wasn't his. He was the victim of infidelity. Our prenup had an infidelity clause. This is common in wealthy families to protect assets. If one spouse commits adultery, they owe the other spouse $600,000 in penalties. Plus, the cheating spouse forfeits any claim to the other's property or assets. Plus, the wronged spouse can sue for additional emotional damages. Marcus's endgame was crystal clear. He would walk away with at least $600,000 minimum. He'd destroy my reputation completely. He'd probably get substantially more in a civil lawsuit. And I would have been so devastated, so confused, so desperate to protect my child that I wouldn't have fought back effectively. He was counting on my shame and confusion to make me compliant. He was counting on me being too broken to see clearly. He almost got away with it. Dr. Montgomery pulled more documents from the folder. Emma had saved everything. Original sample records showing the switch, the donor's identification number, payment records that could be traced to accounts Marcus controlled. There were even email communications between Marcus and the embryologist. They thought they were being clever, using personal email accounts and deliberately vague language. But there was enough, more than enough to prove conspiracy and fraud. Emma had also tracked down the donor. His name was Julian Graves. a 29-year-old medical student who'd been paid $17,000 in cash. Normal sperm donation pays maybe $75 to $150. $17,000 should have been a massive red flag, but medical school debt doesn't pay itself. Julian was told it was a private arrangement for a couple who wanted extra privacy. He had no idea he was participating in fraud. When he found out the truth, he was absolutely furious and immediately willing to cooperate fully. There was one more thing. Patricia said this carefully, like she was afraid the words might physically hurt me. Something her own investigation had uncovered. Marcus Lennox had $210,000 in gambling debts. He'd been gambling heavily for years. Online poker, sports betting, casino trips he'd told me were financial conferences. All while pretending to be a responsible wealth management consultant with his life perfectly together. And the money for the bribes, the $55,000 he'd paid to corrupt my IVF treatment and frame me for adultery, he'd embezzled it from his own clients. Small amounts over an extended period, carefully hidden in complex accounting. His firm had no idea yet. Marcus wasn't just trying to steal my inheritance. He was a drowning man grabbing at anything within reach to save himself. His gambling debts were crushing him. The people he owed money to weren't patient bankers who filed lawsuits. They were the kind of people who solve payment problems in very unpleasant ways. I was supposed to be his life raft. My great-aunt's money was supposed to save him from his own catastrophic choices. And he was willing to completely destroy me to get it. I sat in that office for a long time, the documents spread out in front of me, the truth burning through my chest like acid. Shock came first, that cold, paralyzing shock where you can't quite process what you're seeing. Then disbelief. I kept reading the documents over and over, searching for some mistake, some misunderstanding that would make everything okay again. Then the pieces started clicking together in my mind. The late nights that were never about client portfolios, the secret phone calls about things being finalized by summer, his obsession with accessing my money, his careful, calculated attention when we were dating. He'd researched me thoroughly before we ever met. The charity gala where we accidentally bumped into each other wasn't an accident at all. He knew exactly who I was, what I was worth, what I'd inherited, before he ever introduced himself. The way he cried at our wedding, those tears I thought came from overwhelming joy. They were tears of relief. His long game was finally paying off. And my mother, Helena, who I'd pushed away for almost 3 years, who I'd called paranoid and jealous and overprotective, she'd seen through him in one meeting. That man's smile is a performance, she'd said. She tried desperately to warn me. I chose him over her. I stopped speaking to my own mother because she dared to question the man who was planning to destroy me. I thought about crying. I thought about screaming. I thought about driving home immediately and confronting him, throwing those documents in his face, watching him scramble to explain the unexplainable. But then something else happened. Something cold settled deep in my stomach. Something sharp and focused and absolutely calm. He thought I was stupid. He'd built this entire elaborate scheme on the assumption that I would crumble under pressure. That when his trap finally sprang shut, I'd be so devastated by the proof of my infidelity that I'd hand over whatever he wanted just to make the nightmare stop. He thought I was weak. He thought I was naive and sheltered. He thought I was an easy mark because I'd been raised with wealth and privilege. He had absolutely no idea who he'd actually married. I looked at Dr. Montgomery. He doesn't know that I know? No, my sister hasn't told anyone else, and I only made the connection when I saw your file this morning. Good. I gathered the documents carefully. I need copies of absolutely everything, and I need you to connect me directly with Emma. What are you going to do? I stood up slowly. My hand rested on my belly. on the baby who was completely innocent in all of this ugliness. A child who didn't choose their genetic origins. A child I already loved fiercely, regardless of DNA tests or donor identifications or any of the horrible circumstances surrounding their conception. My husband thinks he's been playing chess, I said quietly. He thinks he's several moves ahead. He thinks he's already won. I straightened my shoulders and met Patricia's eyes. He's about to discover I flipped the entire board. I drove home from that appointment with my face carefully neutral, hands steady on the steering wheel, breathing even and controlled, just in case Marcus was watching somehow. He'd installed security cameras around our property 3 years ago. At the time, he said it was for safety, to protect us. Now I wondered if it was surveillance. If he reviewed the footage regularly. If he was tracking my expressions, my body language, searching for any sign that I suspected something was wrong. So I gave him absolutely nothing. No emotion, no tells, nothing he could use. He was waiting when I got home, standing in our kitchen with that smile I'd once found charming. My mother's words echoed in my head. That man's smile is a performance. 3 years too late, I finally understood what she meant. How was the appointment? He asked, wrapping an arm around my waist. Is the baby okay? I smiled back at him. Actually smiled like nothing in my entire world had just exploded. Perfect. I said warmly, everything's absolutely perfect. I showed him the ultrasound photo Dr. Montgomery had printed before everything changed. Look how big they're getting. I deserve every acting award ever created for that performance. I smiled at him over dinner while mentally calculating his bail amount. I asked about his day while picturing him in an orange jumpsuit, answering to a prison guard. I even laughed at his terrible joke about potential baby names. It wasn't funny at all, but I committed to the role like my life depended on it, because in a very real way, it absolutely did. Later that evening, I apologized for being paranoid lately about his late nights and phone calls. I blamed it all on pregnancy hormones, using the exact same excuse he'd been throwing at me for months. His whole body visibly relaxed when he heard it. The tension in his shoulders melted away completely. He thought he was still winning. He thought his plan was proceeding exactly as designed. That night, he slept soundly beside me, his breathing deep and even. I lay awake until 4 in the morning, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, planning every single move of his complete destruction. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Then I drove 3 hours to a different city, checking my mirrors obsessively to make sure I wasn't being followed. Paranoid maybe, but I'd earned that paranoia through bitter experience. I found a private investigator named Catherine Reeves, ex-police detective, 18 years on the force before going private. No-nonsense demeanor, sharp calculating eyes, the kind of woman who'd seen every type of human ugliness and wasn't impressed by any of it anymore. I told her everything, holding nothing back. She listened without interrupting, took detailed notes, and when I finished, she smiled like a predator who'd just spotted wounded prey. Your husband made numerous mistakes, she said with satisfaction. Arrogant men always do. They get overconfident. Give me 3 weeks. She had comprehensive results in 16 days. Marcus's gambling debts totaled $210,000. He owed money to multiple online betting platforms, underground poker operations, and several private lenders who definitely didn't report to the IRS or any regulatory agency. The kind of creditors who get extremely creative about collection methods when payments are overdue. The embezzlement was confirmed beyond any doubt. Approximately $57,000 missing from client accounts at his firm, carefully siphoned over 20 months through small transactions specifically designed to avoid detection algorithms. His supervisors and compliance department had absolutely no idea yet, but they would soon. And then there was the affair. 9 months with his executive assistant. Hotel rooms charged to a credit card I didn't know about. Romantic dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend getaways disguised as financial conferences and client retreats. Catherine had photographs, explicit text messages, credit card receipts, the entire sordid collection. His executive assistant. Of course it was his executive assistant. How completely unoriginal and predictable. I was almost insulted by the cliché of it all. If you're going to betray your pregnant wife, at least show some creativity. Having an affair with your assistant is literally the first chapter of the Cheating Husband Handbook. Not that such a handbook exists, but if it did, Marcus would have highlighted every page and taken detailed notes. Catherine found something else too, something that made my blood boil even hotter. This wasn't Marcus's first attempt at targeting a wealthy woman for financial gain. 6 years ago, he dated someone in Philadelphia, Rebecca Thornton, old family money, substantial trust fund, the whole package. They'd been together for 11 months before she discovered financial irregularities in a joint account he'd convinced her to open. She ended things immediately, but was too humiliated and embarrassed to press charges publicly. Catherine tracked Rebecca down. She was more than willing to provide a detailed statement now. She'd always regretted letting him walk away without consequences. She'd spent 6 years wondering if he was doing it to someone else. Now she knew he absolutely was. I met with Emma Montgomery in secret, at a coffee shop 2 hours from town, where absolutely nobody would recognize either of us. She looked terrible when she arrived, thin and pale, with dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept properly in months. The guilt had been physically consuming her. She started crying the moment she sat down across from me. "I'm so sorry," she kept repeating, her voice breaking. "I knew it was wrong from the very beginning. The money, and he was so convincing, and I thought maybe he really was just trying to protect you from some genetic condition. And I stopped her gently. "I need to know one thing. Are you willing to testify officially, on the record?" She nodded without hesitation, tears streaming down her face. "I'll tell them everything. I should have gone to the police the day after it happened. I was just terrified of losing my nursing license, my entire career, everything I'd worked for. But yes, whatever you need, I'll say it under oath. I'll face whatever consequences come." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman had helped my husband try to destroy my life. She'd accepted $35,000 to participate in fraud and conspiracy. By any reasonable measure, she was complicit in a crime. But Marcus had manipulated her exactly the same way he'd manipulated me. He'd found her vulnerability, her desperate need for money, and he'd exploited it ruthlessly. He was the architect of this nightmare. She was just a tool he'd used. "Don't be scared anymore," I told her quietly. "You're not the villain in this story. He is, and we're going to make sure everyone knows it." The embryologist, once he learned that Emma was cooperating fully and had meticulously kept records of everything, suddenly developed a very convenient conscience. He gave his own detailed statement to Catherine without much persuasion. He was absolutely terrified of losing his medical license and spending years in federal prison. He'd say whatever we needed to ensure Marcus faced consequences. The hardest call I had to make was to my mother. Almost 3 years of cold silence between us. 3 years of choosing Marcus over her. I defended him passionately when she questioned his character and motives. I'd stopped inviting her to family holidays. I'd called her jealous and bitter, unable to accept that I was happy. And she'd been right about absolutely everything from the very first moment she met him. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. Sienna. Her voice was cautious but hopeful, like she'd been waiting for this call for 3 years, but didn't want to jinx the moment by sounding too eager. "Mom." My voice cracked on that single word. "You were right about everything. About him, about all of it. And I'm so incredibly sorry." There was a pause. I braced myself for the "I told you so" she'd absolutely earned through years of patience. For the anger and resentment and hurt I'd caused, by choosing a con artist over the woman who'd raised me with unconditional love. Instead, she said 5 words that broke me completely. "What do you need, sweetheart?" She didn't gloat. She didn't remind me of every warning I'd arrogantly ignored. She didn't point out that she'd been trying to protect me for years while I pushed her away. She just asked how she could help me now. That destroyed me more than anything else had. I cried on the phone for 20 minutes while my mother listened patiently, making soothing sounds, telling me it would be okay, that we'd handle this together. My mother is a retired attorney. She'd specialized in estate and family law for 32 years before she retired. Within 48 hours, she'd connected me with the absolute best divorce lawyer in Massachusetts and a criminal prosecutor who specialized in fraud and white-collar crime. My mom taught me something profound that day. The people who genuinely love you don't need to be right. They don't need to hear you admit they were correct all along. They just need you to be safe and okay. I'd spent 3 years choosing a con artist over the woman who gave me life, and her very first instinct when I called her crying was still to protect me. That's what real love actually looks like. Marcus never understood that, because he'd never felt it. He'd never given it. He was fundamentally incapable of it. My lawyer was a woman named Victoria Chen. 5'3", silver hair cut in a sharp bob, reading glasses perpetually balanced on her nose. She looked like someone's sweet grandmother who baked cookies on weekends. She was actually a shark in expensive cardigans who'd built her reputation destroying men exactly like Marcus. Victoria reviewed everything, methodically. The clinic documents proving the fraud, Emma's sworn statement, the embryologist's cooperation agreement, Catherine's investigation findings about the affair and the embezzlement. The paper trail Marcus thought he'd hidden so carefully wasn't hidden at all to someone who knew where to look. When she finished reading, she looked up at me over those reading glasses and smiled with deep satisfaction. "Your husband is facing fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement charges at the federal level. The prenup infidelity clause works entirely in your favor now because he's the one who committed adultery for 9 months. And his scheme to falsify medical records after the birth? That's premeditated fraud with clear evidence of intent. We have him on multiple felonies." She coordinated closely with the prosecutor. Emma gave a formal sworn statement to police investigators. The embryologist cooperated fully in exchange for reduced charges and a plea agreement. Marcus's firm was quietly notified about the missing client funds. They launched their own internal investigation immediately and froze his access to all accounts within hours. A judge reviewed the comprehensive evidence, found more than sufficient probable cause, and issued an arrest warrant for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. Multiple felony charges. My lawyer called it a formality at this point, just paperwork. I called it the most beautiful piece of paper I'd ever seen in my entire life. 8.5 by 11 inches of pure justice. 7 weeks after that ultrasound appointment that changed everything, I suggested to Marcus that we should throw a celebration. A baby blessing party at my great-aunt's estate. Both families, close friends, an elegant afternoon garden gathering to celebrate our baby arriving soon. His eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. More witnesses to his devoted husband performance. More people who would sympathize with him later when his supposedly unfaithful wife was publicly exposed. More fuel for the victim narrative he was planning to exploit for maximum financial gain. "That's a wonderful idea," he said, kissing my forehead in that gentle way that used to make me feel cherished and safe. "Let me help you plan everything." No, I said, patting his chest affectionately. "You've been working so incredibly hard lately, with all those late client meetings. Let me handle the party arrangements. You just show up and enjoy yourself." He had absolutely no idea that my version of handling everything included police officers waiting discreetly in the guest house, My lawyer stationed strategically near the champagne bar, Julian Graves, the sperm donor, ready to provide testimony, every single piece of evidence organized in labeled folders, and his own parents about to learn exactly who their son really was underneath the carefully constructed facade. The party was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Marcus spent that entire morning in our bathroom, practicing expressions in the mirror like an actor preparing for a performance, adjusting his tie repeatedly, rehearsing his excited father-to-be smile. I watched him through the crack in the door. This man I'd shared a bed with for over 4 years. This man I'd trusted with my future, my family, my heart, my inheritance. He thought he was walking into his crowning achievement, the culmination of years of careful planning. He had absolutely no idea he was walking into his own public execution. If you feel my words reaching you, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you're listening, so I can see how far a woman's voice of truth can actually reach. Help me build this community so we can share more real stories that matter. The Hartley family estate in late spring looked like something from a magazine spread. My great-aunt's gardens in absolute full bloom. 8 decades of careful cultivation, bursting with vibrant color everywhere you looked. Elegant white tents set up on the back lawn, champagne chilling in polished silver buckets. Elaborate flower arrangements on every surface, a string quartet playing softly near the historic rose garden. 60 guests milling about in their finest clothes, talking and laughing. Marcus's parents had driven up from Virginia, so proud of their successful son and his beautiful pregnant wife. My great-aunt would have loved this party, the elegance and tradition of it all. She also would have seen through Marcus in approximately 30 seconds flat. But that's the wisdom that comes with age. The older generation has built-in radar for phonies that the rest of us have to develop through painful experience. Marcus was absolutely in his element, working the crowd like a seasoned politician. Handshakes and backslaps and that charming laugh he'd perfected over years of practice. His hand kept finding my belly whenever someone pointed a camera our direction. Every single photo up, there he was, the devoted father-to-be, gazing at me with what appeared to be genuine adoration. He was extraordinarily good at pretending to be human. I almost felt sorry for him for just a moment. Almost. The feeling lasted approximately 2 seconds before I remembered the $57,000 he'd embezzled and the elaborate fraud he'd constructed to destroy my life. Sympathy evaporated pretty quickly after that reality check. Marcus's mother kept dabbing at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. I always knew he'd make a wonderful father, she told anyone within earshot. Such a good boy growing up. Such a caring, responsible husband. His father walked around with his chest puffed out, shaking hands, clearly proud of the family legacy Marcus was supposedly continuing. The Lennox name being carried forward into another generation. My own mother stood near the dessert table, watching Marcus with the patient expression of a cat observing a mouse that doesn't realize it's already trapped. She caught my eye across the lawn and raised her champagne flute ever so slightly. Almost time. Around 3:30, Marcus did exactly what I knew he would do. He'd been dropping hints for weeks about wanting to celebrate fatherhood publicly with a DNA test. Frame the results in the nursery, he kept saying. Proof of their eternal bond. So romantic, so meaningful, so completely staged for his scheme. At the party, he brought it up again, making sure his voice carried so plenty of people could hear. You know what we should do, sweetheart? He pulled me close, arm around my waist, playing directly to our audience. I've been thinking about this. Let's get one of those DNA test kits. We can frame the results for the nursery. Permanent proof that daddy and baby are connected forever. Wouldn't that be incredibly special? Several guests made appreciative sounds. His mother dabbed her eyes again. Someone said how romantic and thoughtful that was. Another person mentioned wishing their husband had been that sentimental. I pretended to hesitate, playing my role perfectly. Oh, I don't know, that seems complicated. Come on, it'll be amazing. We could even reveal the results right here, right now. Make it part of today's celebration. What do you think, everyone? Should we do it? Encouraging murmurs from the crowd. How sweet. What a beautiful idea. So thoughtful. Well, I looked around, playing the shy, uncertain wife. If everyone thinks it's a good idea. Instead of pulling out a DNA kit, I walked toward the small raised platform we'd set up near the fountain. He could already taste my money, my humiliation, my total destruction. He just didn't realize whose neck was actually in that trap. Instead of pulling out a DNA kit, I walked toward the small raised platform we'd set up near the fountain, the one meant for toasts and speeches. I picked up the microphone, and the quartet stopped playing. Conversations faded as people turned their attention toward me. Marcus smiled up at me from the crowd, champagne glass in hand. He was already mentally rehearsing his shocked, devastated expression, practicing the tears he'd cry when the supposed truth came out about his cheating wife. End quote. Thank you all so much for coming today, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the lawn. This party's supposed to be about celebration, about family, about truth and honesty. I found Marcus's eyes in the crowd and held his gaze. My husband just said he wanted to reveal something special today, so I'm going to help him do exactly that. His smile flickered for just a fraction of a second, the first tiny crack in his performance. I reached under the podium and pulled out a thick folder full of documents. 4 months ago, I learned something about my husband that changed absolutely everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I want to share it with all of you today, because Marcus is absolutely right. This should be about truth. Marcus and I struggled with fertility issues. I continued, my voice steady and clear. His medical diagnosis meant natural conception was essentially impossible for us. So we pursued IVF at a clinic he specifically chose and researched himself. I held up the first document, making sure everyone could see it. These are the original records from that fertility clinic, the records before anyone had a chance to alter them. I let that word hang in the air. Original. Before alterations. Marcus's champagne glass had stopped halfway to his lips. His smile was completely frozen now. The color was draining from his face. These records show that my husband bribed 2 clinic employees to switch his sperm sample with donor sperm, without my knowledge or consent. He paid $35,000 to a nurse named Emma Montgomery. He paid the embryologist another substantial amount, and he paid $17,000 to a young man named Julian Grays. I gestured toward the edge of the crowd where Julian stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but resolute. A 29-year-old medical student who thought he was helping an infertile couple with a private arrangement, not participating in an elaborate fraud. Julian provided the sperm that was used to conceive my child, without my knowledge, without my consent, all orchestrated by my husband. Shocked gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus's mother grabbed his father's arm, her face going pale. Someone dropped a glass, and it shattered loudly on the stone patio. My husband's plan was actually quite sophisticated, I continued, my tone almost conversational now. Wait until our baby was born. Alter the clinic records to show our IVF cycle had failed, making it appear we conceived naturally afterward. Then suggest a DNA test, framed as something sweet and romantic. And when the results proved he wasn't the biological father, which he already knew would happen, he would accuse me of infidelity. I held up more documents. Our prenup has an infidelity clause. If I had supposedly cheated, I would owe him $600,000 in penalties. He could sue for additional damages. He could destroy my reputation completely. He could take everything my great-aunt left me and disappear. Marcus found his voice finally. It came out strangled and desperate. Sienna, honey, this is completely insane. You're confused. It's the pregnancy affecting your thinking. You're not yourself. Everyone can see you're not thinking clearly. End of paragraph. My voice could have cut glass. The entire crowd went absolutely silent. In addition to orchestrating this fertility fraud, my husband embezzled approximately $57,000 from his clients at his wealth management firm to fund this scheme. I looked directly at a man standing near the bar, Marcus's managing director, who'd been quietly invited to attend. His firm is now fully aware and conducting a comprehensive investigation. Marcus's boss set down his drink with a sharp clink. His expression said absolutely everything. My husband also has $210,000 in gambling debts, I continued, displaying more documentation. Money he owes to online betting platforms, underground poker operations, and several private lenders who don't exactly file paperwork with regulatory agencies. The kind of creditors who get very creative about collection methods. And for the past 9 months, I pulled out the photographs. Nothing explicitly inappropriate, but romantic enough to leave zero doubt. He's been having an affair with his executive assistant. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, weekend getaways disguised as business conferences. Marcus's mother made a sound like she'd been physically struck. I displayed several of the photos. Restaurant entrances, hotel lobbies, the kind of evidence that removes any possibility of denial or explanation. This wasn't even his first attempt, I added, my voice getting colder. 6 years ago in Philadelphia, he targeted another woman with substantial family wealth, Rebecca Thornton. That relationship ended when she discovered financial irregularities. She was too embarrassed at the time to press charges. She's provided a detailed statement to investigators now and is fully prepared to testify in court. Marcus's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the stone patio and exploded into pieces, champagne spraying across his expensive Italian shoes. "Those are lies," he stammered, his voice shaking. "She's making all of this up. She's mentally unstable. The pregnancy has affected her mind. Can't you all see she's having some kind of breakdown?" Marcus, his own mother's voice cut through the murmuring crowd, quiet but sharp enough to draw blood. "Is any of this true?" He turned to face her, his mouth opening to deny everything. No words came out. His throat worked uselessly. Emma Montgomery stepped forward from where she'd been standing near the guest house, pale but absolutely determined. "I'm the nurse he bribed," she said clearly. "I have complete documentation of everything. I've already given my full sworn statement to police investigators." Julian Graves spoke up next, his voice steady. "He paid me $17,000 in cash and told me it was a private arrangement for a couple who wanted discretion. I had absolutely no idea I was participating in fraud until Mrs. Hartley's investigator contacted me 6 weeks ago." Word stop. Marcus looked around wildly at the faces of people who'd been laughing and celebrating with him just minutes earlier. His colleagues from the firm, his family, the society connections he'd worked so hard to cultivate and impress. Everyone was staring at him like he was something rotting they just discovered in their garden. Marcus looked around wildly at the faces of people who'd been laughing and celebrating with him just minutes earlier. His colleagues from the firm, his family, the society connections he'd worked so hard to cultivate and impress. Everyone was staring at him like he was something rotting they'd just discovered in their garden. Marcus looked around wildly at the faces of people who'd been laughing and celebrating with him. Then 2 police officers stepped out from the guest house, walking calmly but purposefully across the lawn toward us. Marcus Lennox. The first officer's voice was professionally neutral. "You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." They handcuffed him right there, in front of 60 witnesses. His mother was sobbing openly now, her handkerchief pressed to her mouth. His father refused to look at him, staring at the ground like he wished it would open up and swallow him whole. As they walked Marcus toward the police car waiting in the driveway, he tried one final manipulation. One last desperate attempt. "Sienna, please!" His voice cracked with emotion that might have even been genuine for once. "We can work this out somehow. I made terrible mistakes, but I love you. I've always loved you. Don't do this. Think about our baby. Think about our family. Please." I looked at him, really looked at the man I'd shared my life with for over 4 years. The man I'd defended passionately to my own mother. The man who'd stood at an altar and promised to love and cherish me, while secretly calculating exactly how much he could steal from me. "You're absolutely right, Marcus," I said calmly. "I am thinking about my baby. That's exactly why I'm doing this." They put him in the back of the police car. I watched it drive away slowly down the long gravel driveway, past the gardens my great-aunt had lovingly planted 70 years ago, through the iron gates of the property Marcus had coveted so desperately and would never own. 60 guests stood in complete shocked silence. Then my mother walked up and put her arm around my shoulders. "I'm so proud of you," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "Your great-aunt Adelaide would be too." And for the first time in months, I took a full, deep breath, like I'd been holding it underwater and finally surfaced. Marcus was denied bail. The judge cited him as a significant flight risk. Between his substantial gambling debts and the dangerous people he owed money to, there was too much probability he'd disappear rather than face trial. Those gambling creditors became very interested very quickly once news of his arrest hit the local media. They'd been relatively patient while Marcus had access to a wealthy wife. That patience evaporated instantly the moment they realized the money situation had permanently changed. His affair partner, the executive assistant he'd been sneaking around with for 9 months, resigned from the firm the morning after the party. She didn't even bother cleaning out her desk, just sent a brief email and completely vanished. She didn't wait around to see if the scandal would touch her too. I've seen rats abandon sinking ships with more loyalty. At least rats occasionally look back. Marcus's firm completed their internal investigation within 3 weeks. $57,000 confirmed missing through a sophisticated embezzlement scheme. They filed their own criminal charges immediately. Their reputation was on the line, and they wanted everyone to know they had zero tolerance for fraud. The woman from Philadelphia, Rebecca Thornton, came forward publicly once she heard about the arrest. She'd spent 6 years feeling stupid and embarrassed for falling for his manipulation, too humiliated to pursue justice or even talk about it. She wasn't embarrassed anymore. Her detailed statement added another significant layer to the criminal case prosecutors were building against him. The divorce was finalized in record time. Marcus's lawyer tried desperately to negotiate some kind of settlement, but there was literally nothing to negotiate with. The prenup's infidelity clause, the exact clause Marcus had been planning to weaponize against me, worked entirely in my favor now. He was the one who'd committed adultery for 9 months. He owed me, not the other way around. Not that he had anything to give. Every asset he'd ever claimed to own was either borrowed, stolen, or completely imaginary. The criminal case moved forward efficiently. Emma Montgomery testified with complete honesty about her role and her guilt. The embryologist cooperated fully in exchange for a significantly reduced sentence and probation. Julian Graves provided his statement and offered to testify if needed. The paper trail Marcus thought he'd cleverly hidden wasn't hidden at all to forensic accountants and federal investigators who knew exactly where to look. Fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement. Each charge had overwhelming evidence. Each charge carried substantial prison time. His expensive lawyers couldn't make the evidence disappear or explain it away. His parents stopped attending court proceedings after the 2nd week. His father released a formal statement saying Marcus had made choices that no parent can defend or support. His mother checked into a private facility for what their family spokesperson called exhaustion and stress, which is what wealthy families call it when reality becomes too painful to face directly. Marcus Lennox, who had walked into my life 4.5 years ago with such calculated charm and careful planning, would spend the next 8 to 12 years in federal prison. When he eventually got out, he'd have nothing. No money, no career, no professional reputation, no family willing to acknowledge his existence, no future targets who wouldn't immediately find his criminal record with a simple internet search. The trap he'd built so patiently and meticulously over years had snapped shut on his own neck. Perfect poetic justice. My baby was born 5 months after that garden party. Healthy, beautiful, absolutely perfect, and completely innocent in everything that had happened before their arrival. Some people asked carefully if I was planning to contact Julian Graves, maybe include him somehow in the baby's life. I thought about it seriously, but Julian was a 29-year-old medical student who'd made a questionable decision for money he desperately needed for education debt. He wasn't ready to be a father. He didn't want that role, and I didn't need him to fill it. My child would have me, would have my mother finally back in my life exactly where she belonged, would have the entire Hartley family legacy, the traditions and love my great-aunt had built over decades. That was more than enough. That was everything that mattered. And I learned something profound through this entire nightmare. Family isn't about DNA or genetics. It's not about blood tests or biological matches on a laboratory report. Family is about who shows up consistently, who stays when things get difficult, who chooses you every single day, especially when it's hard. My mother chose me when I absolutely didn't deserve it after years of pushing her away. I chose my baby when the circumstances were complicated and messy. That's what family actually means at its core. My mother and I have lunch together every single week now. We're making up for 3 lost years, one conversation at a time, one shared meal at a time. She never once said those 4 words she'd absolutely earned. I told you so. Not even once. Finally, I asked her directly why she never said it. She set down her coffee cup and smiled with that knowing look. Because watching you completely take down that man with such precision and intelligence was infinitely more satisfying than any 4 words could ever be. I laughed, my first genuine, from-the-belly laugh in what felt like years. 4 weeks after that garden party, early on a Tuesday morning, I sat in my great-aunt's kitchen. My kitchen now, in the house Marcus had wanted so desperately to own and sell. Sunlight poured through the same windows that had watched 7 generations of Hartley women live their lives with strength and dignity. The same windows my great-aunt Adelaide had looked through while drinking her morning teas 60 years ago. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea using her exact recipe, her favorite specific brand. Some traditions are absolutely worth preserving and continuing. My phone buzzed on the granite counter. Text message from my mother. Lunch tomorrow? There's a new place near the harbor I want to try. I smiled and typed back immediately. Always. Noon? Place outside those historic windows, the gardens were in spectacular full bloom. The roses my great-aunt planted when she was a young bride in the 1950s. The hydrangeas she carefully added when my mother was born. The lavender border I'd helped her install when I was 9 years old. My small hands patting rich dark soil around each fragrant seedling, while she told me stories about our family history and the strong women who came before us. Strong, PA put my hand on my belly, felt my baby move and shift. Active this morning. Marcus Lennox had tried to take absolutely everything from me. My inheritance, my reputation, my future, my peace of mind, my sense of safety. All he actually accomplished was showing me exactly how strong I'd always been underneath. How resilient. How capable of fighting back when cornered. End of Strong PA. Some people spend their entire lives waiting passively for karma to arrive and balance the scales. I was fortunate enough to deliver mine in person with comprehensive documentation in front of 60 witnesses, with law enforcement present. My great-aunt Adelaide used to say that Hartley women don't break under pressure. We bend when we need to. We adapt to circumstances. We survive what would destroy others. And when someone tries to burn us down completely, we rise from those ashes and build something even better than before. Marcus thought he'd married an easy target, a sheltered, wealthy woman who'd crumble under pressure. He married a Hartley, and now he has 8 to 12 years in a federal prison cell to think very carefully about that catastrophic miscalculation. I took a long sip of my tea, feeling the warmth spread through me. My baby kicked again, stronger this time, a reminder of the future I was building, a future Marcus never be part of, a future that belonged entirely to me and my child and the family that actually mattered. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Jade. Coffee this weekend? I want to hear everything about how motherhood is treating you. I smiled and responded, Saturday morning, my place. I'll make that coffee cake you love. The morning sun climbed higher, filling the kitchen with golden light. The same light that had filled this space for over a century. The same light that would fill it for generations to come. Hartley women, building lives of strength and purpose and love, in this house that had witnessed so much history. I stood up, rinsed my teacup, and walked to the window overlooking the gardens. My hand rested on my belly, on the new life growing there. A life that would learn these stories eventually, would understand that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up. It's about fighting back intelligently when someone tries to destroy you. Marcus made one critical mistake in his elaborate scheme. He assumed I was weak because I'd been raised with privilege. He assumed wealth made me soft and vulnerable. He had absolutely no idea that the same family that built this fortune over 7 generations had also built women of steel wrapped in silk. I smiled at my reflection in the window glass. Behind me, the kitchen where generations of Hartley women had gathered. Before me, the gardens they'd planted and nurtured. Above me, the house they'd protected and preserved. And inside me, the next generation preparing to arrive. Marcus Lennox thought he could take all of this. He thought he could steal my great-aunt's legacy and leave me with nothing. Instead, he lost everything, while I kept it all. My home, my inheritance, my dignity, my strength, my family, my future. Sometimes justice takes years to arrive. Sometimes it never comes at all. But sometimes, if you're smart enough and strong enough and angry enough in exactly the right way, you get to deliver it yourself. And let me tell you something I learned through all of this darkness. That moment when you realize you're stronger than the person who tried to break you, that moment when you watch them face consequences for their actions, that moment is sweeter than any revenge fantasy could ever be. The baby kicked again, reminding me to stop dwelling on the past and focus on the future. A future that's brighter now than it ever was when Marcus was in it. Funny how that works. I turned away from the window and walked toward the nursery I'd been preparing. Soft yellow walls, white furniture my mother had helped me choose. A rocking chair that had belonged to my great-aunt, carefully restored. This room would be filled with love and laughter and all the things that actually matter. No DNA test needed to prove the bonds that form here. This is my life now, my real life. Not the performance Marcus wanted, not the tragedy he'd scripted. My authentic life with my family and my child and my future stretching out ahead of me, full of possibilities he tried to steal but couldn't. If you feel my words and this story resonated with you, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Tell me from which city you're listening so I can see how far the voice of women's truth and strength can actually reach across this world. Help me build this community so we can continue sharing real stories that matter, Stories that might help someone else recognize the signs I missed. Stories that might give someone else the courage to fight back. Because that's what this is really about. Not revenge, not even justice, though that was satisfying. It's about showing other women that you can survive betrayal. You can fight back against manipulation. You can reclaim your life from someone who tried to steal it. You are stronger than you know, and you deserve so much better than someone who sees you as a transaction instead of a person. My great-aunt Adelaide lived to be 93 years old. She died peacefully in her sleep in this house, surrounded by family who loved her genuinely. She left behind a legacy of strength and grace, and absolute refusal to let anyone diminish her. When I was younger, I didn't fully understand what that meant. Now I do. Now I'm living it. Now I'm passing it forward to my child. The morning stretched ahead of me, full of ordinary tasks, laundry to fold, emails to answer, a grocery list to make. Simple, normal things. But they feel different now. They feel like mine in a way they never did when Marcus was here. Always watching, always calculating, always planning his next move in a game I didn't know I was playing. I walked through the house, touching familiar surfaces. The banister my great-great-grandmother had polished weekly. The dining table where 7 generations had gathered for holidays. The mantel where family photographs stretched back over a century. All of it still here, still mine, still safe. Marcus wanted this house so desperately, wanted to sell it, take the money, fund his gambling addiction and his debts and his next scheme. He saw it as an asset to liquidate. I see it as a living history, as a responsibility, as a gift from the women who came before me to the women who come after. He never understood that you can't put a price on that. He never understood that some things aren't for sale at any amount. He never understood that trying to take this from me wasn't just theft. It was an attack on everything my family had built. And Hartley women protect what's ours. My phone buzzed one more time. Another text from my mother. I love you, sweetheart. See you tomorrow. I smiled and typed back. Love you too, Mom. 3 simple words that meant everything. 3 years of silence erased by those words, repeated daily now. Marcus tried to isolate me from my mother, from anyone who might see through his act. That was part of his strategy too. Keep me dependent on him alone. Make him my only source of validation and support. It didn't work. My mother waited patiently for 3 years, never giving up, ready to help the moment I reached out. That's the difference between people who actually love you and people who are using you. The ones who love you stay, even when you push them away, even when you're making terrible mistakes, even when you can't see what they see, they stay anyway. The afternoon sun shifted, creating new patterns of light across the hardwood floors. The same floors my great-aunt walked across thousands of times. The same floors my child will take their first steps on someday. Continuity, history, family. The things that actually matter when you strip away everything else. Marcus is sitting in a prison cell right now, probably still trying to figure out where his plan went wrong. Probably still convinced he was smarter than everyone else. Probably still believing he deserved my money, my home, my life. Some people never learn. Some people never develop the capacity for genuine self-reflection. They just keep blaming everyone else for the consequences of their own choices. That's not my problem anymore. That's his burden to carry, not mine. I'm done carrying anything that belongs to him. Done making excuses. Done trying to see his perspective. Done giving him space in my thoughts. I'm free. Completely, totally free in a way I haven't been since the day I met him. And that freedom is worth more than any amount of money he tried to steal. The baby kicked again, stronger now. Almost like they're agreeing with me, confirming that we're exactly where we're supposed to be. This little person who will grow up knowing their mother fought for them, fought for their future, fought for their home and their inheritance and their legacy. That's the story they'll hear. Not the ugly details of how they were conceived, but the story of how their mother refused to be a victim. That's the story I want to tell. The story I'm telling right now to anyone listening. You don't have to accept what someone tries to do to you. You don't have to crumble when you discover betrayal. You can fight back intelligently, strategically, with every resource available. You can win. And when you do win, when justice actually prevails for once, it feels like breathing again after being underwater for too long. The sun continued its arc across the sky. Life continued moving forward, and I continued building the future I actually wanted. Not the one Marcus had scripted for his benefit. My future. My child's future. The future those 7 generations of Hartley women made possible by their strength and sacrifice and absolute refusal to be diminished. I am because they were. My child will be because I am. And that continuation, that unbroken chain of strong women protecting what matters, is the greatest revenge against anyone who tries to destroy us. We survive. We rebuild. We pass it forward. Marcus tried to end my story. Instead, he just gave me a better one to tell. And that, in the end, is all that matters. Thank you for listening to my story, for witnessing my truth, for being part of this community where women support each other, share our experiences, and refuse to stay silent about the things that try to break us. Your support means everything. Please like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. Let's see how far our voices can reach together. Until next time, remember this: you are stronger than anyone who tries to use you. You deserve better than anyone who sees you as a transaction. And you have the power to reclaim your life when someone tries to steal it. Always.